So today we have a handstand live, and what I want to do is to go over a few things that would help someone when it comes to practicing handstand. And so it's a bit of a workshop, and you can always watch this, take notes, or practice it with me if you like. And yeah, looks like we're good. Okay, so we're going to begin on our mat. And the first thing that I usually like to think about is the wrist. But we want to be able to think on the wrist in a couple different ways. So one way is to warm up the wrist. And the other way is to not overdo it with the wrist. Because I feel that when we want to try to do something that has so much weight on the wrist, if we do, let's say, an hour or an hour and 15 minutes class, then it is going to be challenging on the wrist. And then by the time we get to do handstand, let's say handstand is a thick pose, then the wrists are going to be tired and the body also might be tired. So this is a nice way to warm up the wrists, just to bring some lubrication into the joints. And we're not going to do a vinyasa practice really. A vinyasa is nice to warm up the body. But I feel that when it comes to just targeting one pose, like handstand, that a hatha style practice works better for me. For you might be different, but for me, hatha style practice works or tends to work a little bit better. So now that the wrists are nice and warm, it is nice to begin on our hands. Now, when we think of handstand, we think of the core, the wrist, which I briefly just talked about, and also flexibility in the hips, because when we are upside down, we're going to be bringing one leg up, and then we're going to be basically separating both legs away from each other. So having flexibility in the hips, whether you're going to use it at the end of the handstand or not, or just to get into it, is good to always bring awareness into the hips. So we got wrist, we got core, we got hips, and another thing that also maybe is not as common to think about is the idea of being upside down. So bringing the head below the heart. A lot of people have difficulties doing that. They might have the strength of their hands. They might have the strength of the core. But when it comes to staying with the head below the heart for a long time, then that is also a challenge. So let's begin with that actually. So we're going to begin standing today, both feet hip distance apart, and it's nice to begin with a forward fold. And actually, we can also do this against the wall. So both feet not against the wall, but both feet about 1 foot distance away from the wall. And this is a nice way to begin to connect to not just the grounding of your feet, but also the grounding behind you, the wall. So pressing the pelvis or the sit bones or the glutes against the wall, and then just letting the head soften down. Both arms soften down as well. Shoulders turn away from the ears. Drawing the belly to spine, so then by bringing the belly to spine, we create space so the upper body softens a little bit further down. The upside down is also a really nice way to open up the hamstrings, because when we get to try our handstand, then we do downward facing dogs and shapes like that, which requires also open hamstrings. So that is kind of related to the hips and the pelvis. So letting the chest soften down toward the legs. And then slowly starting to walk your hands forward. Let's come down into a downward facing dog just to continue in opening the hamstrings. And letting the heels soften down toward the floor and reaching the pelvis back toward the wall as much as you like, or as much as you can. And then slowly coming down to hands and knees. So we did a little bit of hamstrings, we did a little bit of having the head below the heart. And then we also warm up the wrists at the beginning. So now placing both hands on the mat. And then just continuing more of that wrist movement. More of that lubrication of the wrists. As you can shift back, almost like you're moving into a child's pose. Shifting forward, shifting to one side and then the other. And it's nice to maybe draw figure eights here with the body just to bring some movement into the wrist. And it's also nice to be able to kind of work on the whole body at the same time, as opposed to doing the wrist first, and then doing the hamstrings, and then doing the core, and then doing the pelvis. So you can always do a little bit of everything until you're ready to go into your handstand. So that's nice. I think the wrists are feeling stronger. Then it's slowly starting to lower to the forearms, so we don't have to tire the wrist too much. Lower to the forearms as we start to shift back into a dolphin plank. Here you can move the hands, you can move the wrists. So it's basically to start warming up the shoulders and warming up the core. Belly to spine. Notice your breath. Remember that any option that you would teach in a class goes here, whether knees are down or knees are off the floor. Relaxing facial muscles and starting to activate a little bit of mindfulness in terms of your breath, because handstand is a strong pose, is a peak pose. So we want to be able to work on the breath so we can activate a more relaxing way of breathing, a more parasympathetic way of breathing. So then when we get to handstand, we're not afraid or nervous, but it's more of a playfulness kind of feeling or sensation. And also that we are able, if we need to try to relax while we are in the pose. And then knees come down. Let's move into a Sphinx pose for a second, just to open up the back, drawing the belly to the spine. So we've done a little bit of wrist, hamstrings, core, shoulders. Let's do a bit of hips. So coming up onto your hands and knees. This one is one of my favorites. First of all, I like to kind of open up the rotators. So this is double pigeon pose. I like to open up the rotators, which are muscles underneath the glutes in the pelvis. And I do this with double pigeon pose because then it's a way to start stimulating the hips without getting too quick into like a lunge or a pigeon or anything like that. Just in case you feel like your thighs are tight today. Breathing here. And each exhalation to take the upper body maybe a little bit further into the pose. Inhaling to prepare, exhaling to go a little bit deeper into the pose. And then let's do one more cycle of breath here. And then slowly switching legs. So taking the other leg or the ankle on top of the knee for double pigeon pose. I like to keep both shins parallel, so one is stacking over the other, and both ankles flex. I feel that that keeps the alignment of the knees in relationship to the alignment of the pelvis, so the knees are not receiving a lot of weird weights or they're being torqued. So continue to bring the upper body forward, shoulders down. Each exhalation is an opportunity to draw upper body further to your legs. Feel free to elongate the exhalations. Again, it's nice to elongate the exhalations as another way to continue to bring awareness into your breath. Just one more cycle of breath here. And slowly start to roll back up. I'm just quickly going to come back close to the camera just to check if there is any comments or anything. Perfect. Okay, so we've done wrist, we've done a little bit of core, we've done a little bit of shoulders, a little bit of hips, a little bit of head below heart, because that's going to go in our handstand. And then let's continue to move into our pelvis a little bit deeper. So coming into a forward fold and stepping right leg back just for a lunge. And then back knee comes down. This is going to be really useful when it comes to kicking one leg into the wall and then the other leg closer to the ground. So here you can shift the weight back, you can extend your front leg or heel to toe the heel forward. As you start to kind of like, it's almost like you're trying to move into splits, but usually for splits, it takes a while to actually get into splits. So I just do kind of like a half splits here, whatever my body is able to do. And you can also support yourself with hands, with blocks also underneath hands if you like. And you can shift the weight back and extend the leg just to work a little bit of the hamstrings again at the same time as working on the hips. Maybe upper body forward. And then slowly let's begin to switch. So tuck back toes under. As you start to walk your hands forward, you can step the back leg a little bit further forward so that you can switch legs. And again, back knee comes down. Begin any way you like, hips squared as much as possible. And then slowly starting to maybe extend the front leg as you heel toe the heel a little bit further forward. Belly continues to stay engaged. Crown of the head continues to reach out to the ceiling. Here I'm going to move into a hamstring stretch as I continue to work on the separation of both legs. Feel free to slide front leg a little bit further forward if you like. And then inhaling to lengthen. Let's just go one more exhale to take the upper body further down to the leg. And then slowly front knee bends, foot on the floor, hands walk forward, back knee off the floor, step back foot slightly forward. As you shift back, let's go back into downward dog here. So now this downward dog shape, start to invite your students to begin to bring awareness into this downward dog shape. The reason for this is because the shape is quite similar already to like handstand. Let's do this shape in a different way. So sitting against the wall, placing your back against the wall, both legs straight in front. So this is staff pose, Dandasana. And it is a great shape because it's like downward dog. So if you were to reach your arms up and if you were to flex, this is flex, extend. So extend at the wrist joints. Then it's almost like you're in a downward dog, but upside down downward dog, where you have changed the plane of the downward dog. And you can flex the ankles, so you can activate the muscles of your legs. Feel free to spread the hands nice and wide. Belly to spine. So we've done downward dog, we've done Dandasana. Another shape that is pretty close to our handstand is L-shaped pose. Actually, no, I'm gonna slide another shape before we do L-shaped pose. So if you are in your Dandasana, letting go of the hands, and then slowly starting to find your way into a forward fold, however is available here. And then slowly bend your knees as you begin to roll out the body. So another variation of that shape is to place yourselves facing the wall and then bringing both hands against the wall and walking the hands down. So that's another variation of your downward dog. So there's going to be 4 ways in which we can do this shape. Way 1 is downward dog. Way 2 is staff pose or Dandasana. And then this is the third version, which is kind of like an upside down downward facing dog. And you can also work here on bringing one leg up, which activates the glutes and the hips, like a warrior 3. Keeping the hips squared. And just one more cycle of breath here. And then slowly rolling out through the spine as you find Dandasana. And I'm going to quickly check the time here. Okay. So now the fourth way, or the fourth plane of movement of that same L-like shape is pretty close to our handstand. So to measure that, sitting in Dandasana staff pose, noticing where the heels are in front of you, and then roughly make an idea of your yoga mat, where that is, and then just keeping one hand there or just keep a visual cue. And I like to put the wrist there. On hands and knees, you might notice that you already start to touch the wall with your feet. Both hands are shoulder distance apart. Here we're going to work on wrists, on shoulders, and on the core. So it's like we start to layer those principles that we established at the beginning. Slowly starting to come up into a downward facing dog-like pose. You can keep heels against the wall and toes on the floor. And then one foot walks up. You can start to press that foot, start to play with that, see how that feels. And then eventually the second foot comes into that position. So this is basically that same L-shaped pose that we've done before, but now we've taken it to a more advanced variation. And then when you're ready, lower both feet down to the floor. We can go back to that wrist massage, lubrication for the wrist. So that was shoulder, that was wrist, that was belly, that was core. And then let's try it once again just to see what happens. So placing the hands down. I already know that my visual cues might be gone here because I've done handstand and I don't remember where my feet were and my hands were before, but I do remember that kinesthetic memory of the feet against the wall. So then if you notice where your feet are, your knees underneath the pelvis, maybe you start to also remember kinesthetically where your wrists were in space. Again, bringing both knees off the floor. It's nice to also try to keep your spine as straight as much as possible and stacking shoulders over wrists, because those are all principles of handstand. Walking the feet against the wall. Then whenever you're ready, taking a break. The more you can stay there, the better. And that might be your handstand for today. For today, this might be your handstand. That's it. Maybe it's just having shoulders over the wrist and feeling that and working from there. Eventually, then you can start to be or feel stronger and more confident to get into handstand. So now we can do that L-shaped pose a third time. And that's where we're going to start incorporating the hips. So hands underneath shoulders. I'm going to come up into the L-shaped pose, and then one leg is going to reach out to the ceiling, and then I'm going to switch. And then after I've done that, just giving some love to the wrist, I can already feel that my wrists are slowly getting tired. So imagine the wrists getting tired at the same time, adding vinyasas and adding other power poses or peak poses. So it can become quite tiring. So noticing, be mindful of the energy of your students. If they're used to flow and power classes every day, then they will probably have the strength to do more than handstand. But if you're introducing a group of people to handstand, it's nice to take it slowly. I'm just going to quickly check the time. Perfect. Okay, so now we've done that. And then I'm going to show you just a few ways in which we can get into handstand after the body feels a little bit warmer. So then it's nice to be as close to the wall as possible, because the wall is going to support you when you start to go upside down. So coming into a downward facing dog. For this, I usually like to keep about 1.5 feet distance from the wall into my fingertips. One leg begins to come up. Remember here that idea of lengthening the spine and shifting shoulders over wrists. Standing leg is nice and bouncy, and you can play with the way you're going to land. So we're not going to land flat on the foot, or we're not going to land with a lot of force. We're going to keep the energy in the core, and we're going to try to land nice and softly on the toes. And you can switch legs. And maybe that's your handstand. You don't have to go further than that. If you feel that you start to get confident, you can start to take the legs closer to the wall. Maybe one leg is against the wall, the other one is off the wall. You can switch legs. And it's a nice way to notice your alignment. So, keeping the shoulders underneath pelvis. One foot can be sucking over the pelvis. And then looking down to the floor. And once you start to look down to the floor, you start to find a drishti, or a focal point, which we use a lot in a lot of the yoga poses. And then what I'm going to try to do next is to have the hands on the floor, looking to the floor, and the foot that is against the wall, I'm going to try to take it off the wall to see if I can balance by feeling the hands and by the drishti. One quick thing about the hands is when I have, so let's say this is the floor and this is my hand against the floor, and there is a little bit of a conversation because I'm trying to find balance. It's like when you're standing and you're trying to find kind of like a back and forth. If you think of a baby trying to learn how to walk, is that kind of like that back and forth that they find when they're walking. So that back and forth, floor, hand, is the same thing we want to find in the handstand. So there is a conversation between fingertips and heels of the palms. And you can play with scooping a little bit the hand, so the hand doesn't have to be completely flat. So a bit of scooping, a little bit of space here. So playing with all those things. Let's do it quickly before the time finishes. So, hands about 1.5 feet distance from the wall. One leg up. Looking, finding drishti. And then both legs begin to meet, and I start to shift between my, I'll do it again. I start to shift between my fingertips and heels of the palms. So there is that back and forth that I feel helps a lot when trying to achieve that handstand. So that was a quick kind of summary of some of the important parts of the body to warm up and to prepare before you go into a handstand, or if you want to teach it in a class, going through those body parts and getting them ready. And I hope that for those who are interested in going upside down and practicing poses like handstand, that this tutorial has been helpful. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, and I'll answer them throughout the day. Have a lovely rest of the day. Bye-bye.